Hey everyone, so today we're going to move on and we are going to use our factoring methods to actually solve now. Alright, so I want you to pause the video. Here are the different types of factoring that we know how to do. Do these on your own. Alright, so our first one is our MC chart. We know that because it's a trinomial and there are no numbers in front of x squared. So we are multiplying to negative 70 and combining to negative 3. And we get 10 and 7, and the 10 is negative. Sorry, I'm sitting on the couch. This is like awkward to write. I have to like make my wrist better. Okay, the next one, those are perfect squares and subtractions. That's our dots. So that is 4x plus 5, 4x minus 5. Number 3, that is GCF. We have x's everywhere, and 8 and 18 are not perfect squares. So the GCF here is, let's see, 2x. That leaves us with 4x minus 9, parentheses, 2x on the outside. Now, is that a dots left over? It's not, because it's not x squared. If it was 4x squared minus 9, that would be a dots. And then number 4, this is a slide. It's very similar to number 1, but there's a number in front of x squared. So we are multiplying and combining. Combining is still 13. Multiplying, we have to do 14 times 3. Right? Multiply the a and the c together, and that gives us 42. So what multiplies to 42 combines to 13. That is 6 and 7. So then remember, we put the 3x in both parentheses because we don't know who it goes with. And then plus 6 plus 7. And then I have to look for a GCF. I have an extra 3 in the problem. The first binomial has that extra 3. So I divide it out. So x plus 2 and 3x plus 7. And that's the factoring that we know how to do. All right, what is a quadratic equation? So you'd think quadratic 4, quad. I guess it kind of has 4, but it's a trinomial. It's a trinomial of the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So that's our basic trinomial problem that we've been talking about, where a, b, and c are constants, and a can never be equal to 0. So with a quadratic, the highest power has to be x squared. You can't have you have to have an x squared. You can't have a quadratic where it's just bx plus c, because that's not quadratic. That would be a linear, like a line. Okay, so examples. So in our do now, right, we had 3x squared plus 13x plus 14. But because when it's a quadratic, we set it equal to 0. It's no longer an expression. All the problems we've been doing are expressions. A quadratic is an equation, right? And then we could have something like x squared minus 9 equals 0. It's another example. So in that case, the b term, the middle term, is gone. B is 0. And then you can have it where instead of a 0, x squared minus 9x plus 1 equals 5x minus 2x squared, or something like that. As long as the highest power is x squared, it is a quadratic, and there's an equal sign. Okay. If a times b equals 0, what must be true? Think about it. If you're multiplying two things, what do you know? Well, the only way to multiply to 0 is one of them needs to be 0, right? Either a has to be 0 or b has to be 0. Right? So one of them is 0. That's called the 0 property. Whenever two terms equal 0, one of them must be equal to 0 in the real number system. I say the real number system because when you get to really high level math, you can find examples where that's not true. So either A equals 0 or B equals 0. This is called the zero property. I'm only telling you, like, I don't really care that you know the name of it necessarily, but on IXL and some other places, they actually refer to it as the zero property. So, within the directions, like, use the zero property. Okay, so now we know how to factor, right? So now we're going to solve. Notice the objective is solving quadratic equations by factoring. So take a magical guess. What do you think we're going to do first? We are going to factor. So look at this. How do we factor that? That's our MC chart. We're multiplying to 8, combining to 6. That's 2 times 4. So we get x plus 2 times x plus 4. But now we're setting those equal to 0. What are the two parentheses doing? When parentheses touches, that means multiplication. So imagine this is our A and this is our B. A times B equals 0, like in that last slide. So if two things multiply to 0, one of them has to be 0. But we don't know which one. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, oh, my first term, my first factor, x plus 2 equals 0. But then we could also have x plus 4 equals 0. So we're going to set each of our factors equal to 0 and solve. How do you solve a linear equation? I'm just going to subtract 2 on both sides. Over here, minus 4, we do the opposite. And that's it, we're done. So it's basically solving quadratics is factoring and then taking one extra step where you set them equal to 0 and solve. All right, so start number 2, factor, what multiplies to negative 72 and combines to 6. Should get 6 times 12, where the 6 is negative. So we get x minus 6, x plus 12 equals 0. We're going to take our those two factors are multiplying, so that means I'm going to set each of them equal to 0. X equals 6 equals 0, and x plus 12 equals 0. And then we're going to solve our equation. The opposite of minus 6 is plus 6. So x equals 6. Over here, minus 12, x equals negative 12. And those are your two answers. And you can put the word or between them if you want. That's the answer. All right, so what did we just do in those last couple problems? First, we factored. You always factor first. So we factor our quadratic, and then we set each factor equal to 0. So each of the stuff in the parentheses equals 0, and then we just solve for the variable, right? We use adding, subtracting, sometimes you end up dividing, depends on the problem. All right, I want you to pause the video and just factor. Start by factoring. Now, this first one's a little different. It is not an MC chart. What is that? That's a GCF. The GCF here is 6x. So we get 6x times x minus 2. I like to write the 0 on the right side, so I'm going to move it. Okay, so now this one's a little weird for students. What are the two things multiplying? Well, the multiplying is where the parentheses are. So we're going to say 6x equals 0 and x minus 2 equals 0. So this one on the right is nice and easy. We just add 2 to both sides. How do you solve 6x equals 0? What are the 6 and the x doing? They are multiplying. What's the opposite of multiplying? Dividing. So we're going to divide both sides by 6. Please don't leave it 0 over 6. What 0 divided by anything? I have no friends and I want to put them in 6 groups. How many are in each group? 0, because I have no friends. I have friends. Why is my 0 keep disappearing? This is so weird. Okay, that was really weird. My 0 kept disappearing. All right, number 4. All right, do this one on your own. So, what multiplies to 25 combines to negative 10, x minus 5, and x minus 5 equals 0. Set each of them equal. Now notice, how many answers are there? Well, there's kind of 2 answers, but they're the same, right? So this is a special one. When we get to graphing, you'll see why this looks like this. So we just get x equals 5. There's only one solution here. All right, pause the video. I want you to try this on your own. These are not MC charts, though, so look at what kind of factoring is this. So number 5, we've got x squared minus 49. That's a dots, right? So 0 equals x plus 7, x minus 7. Set each of them equal to 0. Notice what happens in all of these. We just end up changing the sign. If you are comfortable skipping steps and you see this and then, whoopsies. If you see this and you're like, oh, okay, x equals 7, go for it. If you want to skip steps, you can. I'm not going to be picky about that in Algebra 2. All right, next one, that's a GCF. What's my GCF? 2x, 2x. So we get 2x times x plus 3 equals 0. Set each term equal to 0, each factor. So on the left, 2x, so we divide by the 2 to get x by itself. 0 divided by 2 is 0. Minus 3, x equals negative 3. And that's it. We're done. Almost there, guys. Okay, so now this one's a little different. These are the harder ones. Figured we'd start these today. All right, what do you notice about number 7 and number 8? So these aren't equals 0. We can't do these unless it says equals 0. So the first thing we need to do is move something so that 0 is on one side. So in number 7, I'm just going to subtract 6. Because we have to have 0. We need to use the 0 property. 6 minus 6 is 0. Now that minus 6 doesn't combine with anything. It's a plain number. Right? So whenever we're doing quadratics, we have to use the 0 property, which means we need 0 on one side. So 100% of the time, make sure you have 0 on one side. This is my MC chart. That's 1 and 6, where the 1 is negative, to give us 5. So x minus 1, x plus 6. X minus 1 is 0. X plus 6 is 0. X is 1. X is negative 6. All right, so number 8, again, we need to subtract. So try that one on your own. I am going to subtract the 81, mostly because I like to leave the x squareds positive. All right, 81 minus 81 is 0. And we're left with 4x squared minus 81. So now this one's a little trickier for kids. Not necessarily the factoring, it's the solving. Okay, so when we factor, we get 2x plus 9, 2x minus 9. Now we're going to set each of those equal to 0. So now, unlike all the other ones we've done today, these are two-step equations. What's the first step to solve for x? We always do our adding and subtracting first. So I'm going to minus 9. 2x equals negative 9. And then what do we do to get x by itself? Divide by 2. So remember, adding and subtracting first. Then we divide. So negative 9 over 2. Same thing over here. This time we're adding 9. 2x equals 9, and then divide by 2. X equals 9 over 2. I usually leave it as a fraction. I don't bother with the decimal. Last slide. Try them on your own. Right. Just like in number 9, we need to subtract. So I'm going to minus 12 on both sides. So 2x squared minus 10x minus 12. Now, this one is not a slide. It looks like it. But before we do, what are we supposed to check before we try a slide? Is there a GCF? There is. We can divide everything by 2. So x squared minus 5x minus 6. Now I'm going to factor that. It's an MC chart. We get x minus 6, x plus 1 equals 0. So now at this point, I always end up just ignoring my 2. So when the things that are multiplying, we try x minus 6 equals 0, x plus 1 equals 0, and then we have that 2. 2 equals, but does 2 equal 0? No, you can't have a constant number equaling 0. So I kind of just ignore that 2 that's in front. So we get x equals 6. And x equals negative 1. All right, last one. Subtract 30x on both sides. 0 equals 15x squared minus 30x. This is a GCF of 15x. So 15x times x minus 2. Set each term equal to 0. So here we divide, right? 15x means 15 times x, so we divide. 0 divided by 15 is 0. And then over here we add 2 to both sides. And we are done. So that is solving equations with factoring, quadratics.